Have you ever felt like you're bleeding emotionally, spiritually, but you're still praying for healing? Maybe it's in your relationships, your career, your church community. You're asking God to heal you, but you're still holding on to the very thing that's cutting you. If that's you today, let's talk about it, because sometimes God has to burn you to save your life. Let me share a little of my own journey. When I first came to God, I came sincerely, but with conditions I didn't even realize were there. I had this tight grip on a life that God was trying to have me let go of. I didn't understand why He was shifting my relationships or why He was pulling me away from things I thought were good for me. I remember talking to my cousin who also knows the Lord, and she said something that changed my life. Either you let go of what God is telling you to let go of, or God will snatch it away and expose the very thing He was trying to protect you from. Even with her wisdom, I still held on, and unbeknownst to me, I was bleeding. Bleeding in relationships, bleeding in the wrong career, bleeding in the wrong church. I was bleeding but praying for healing. Here's what I learned. Sometimes God tries to move us away from what's cutting us, but we refuse to let go. And when He can't pull us away gently, He has to use what feels like fire. Let me break this down with an analogy. In ancient times and even now, doctors would sometimes use cauterization to stop severe bleeding. That's when they burn the wound to stop the bleeding and prevent infection. It's not because they're cruel, it's because sometimes fire is the only thing that can save a life. Think about that. Sometimes God has to burn you to stop the bleeding. Why would a loving God do that? Because you can bleed out and die while you're still alive. Some of us are living with spiritual leeches, people and habits draining us dry. We bleed and call it love. We bleed and call it loyalty. We bleed and call it purpose. But God sees what we can't. If He doesn't cauterize the wound, we'll never be whole. Sometimes God has to burn us to avoid amputation, because if the bleeding keeps going, it infects other parts of our lives, and we start thinking we're too broken to heal. God doesn't want to amputate you from your purpose. He wants to cauterize the wound so you can walk again, whole and healed. Now listen, when God burns you, it's not to harm you, it's to heal you. I've been in seasons where I felt numb after God pulled me away from things I thought I needed. But every time, that burning was the beginning of our healing. Let me give you 3 quick points to consider when God burns you to stop the bleeding. You can become desensitized to what you were created for. Sometimes we get so used to bleeding that we become numb to our purpose. God didn't call you to a life of constant bleeding. He called you to abundance. Your worship can lose its power. When we're too busy bleeding, it's hard to worship God in spirit and in truth. How can we worship from a place of pain that we refuse to let Him heal? You might stop praying. Prayer is foundational to the Christian walk. It's how we communicate with God, how we confess our sins in which He's faithful and just, 1 John 1:9, how we seek His will and hear His answers. But a bleeding heart grows weary, a bleeding soul stops praying, and when we stop praying, we cut off the lifeline God has given us to heal. If this spoke to you, drop a comment below. Let's talk about it. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more faith-filled encouragement. This is the Everyday Believers Network, where we remind you to trust God with your everyday.